So glad that you're joining us today. For anyone who's new to Conversations with Zendesk, formerly known as CX Moment, these are candid conversations that give us an opportunity to hear insights and thoughts from leaders navigating the world of customer experience and support, and hopefully giving you some practical insights and advice that you can take back to your own teams. In this episode, we're joined by Andrew Spittle, who's the head of AI at Automattic, the open source software company behind WordPress, Tumblr, and many other platforms that really power the internet. Today, we'll be talking about the transformative possibilities of AI on customer service, workforce management, and the overall customer experience. There is just so much happening in the space of CX and AI right now, so I am super excited about this conversation. But before we dive in, we would love to hear from you. You know, we always love to start with a fun question for the audience. If you could dedicate a blog or website to your favorite hobby, what would that hobby be? Let us know in the chat. And as folks are answering that, keep in mind that if you have any questions during the conversation today, feel free to pop them into the chat. We want to make today's session as interactive as possible and love to hear your questions. I'm already seeing some really great responses in there. Pickleball, coffee. I hear you on coffee. I would definitely start a blog about coffee. But enough from me. Let's welcome Andrew. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Joey. Good to be here.
Could you start by sharing a bit about your role at Automattic as head of AI and sharing a bit about how support is structured at Automattic, given that you have such a great and diverse suite of brands?
Yeah, so as head of AI, I'm also responsible for all of our customer support and trust and safety kind of across the company. And you're right, we've got a lot of different brands and products that fall under Automattic. Most people aren't necessarily familiar with Automattic, but are familiar with the individual brands. They all orient around the idea of democratizing publishing, commerce, and messaging, though. So making tools that are easily accessible to everyday people. And one of the ways we structure the company and structure support is to try to make sure each of those businesses has what they need to succeed, because running an e-commerce platform is a little different than a social media company, which is a little different than a podcasting app, which is a little different than like a private journaling app. And so we have different business units within the company, and we divide support so that folks are able to focus on one of those at a time. And so we call our support team happiness, and our team members are happiness engineers.
I love
And
that.
they focus on, one area of what our products do. So they'll probably, focus heavily on WooCommerce or WordPress.com, but we allow for a lot of freedom of movement in between. So we're a fully distributed company. We always have been since 2005. That means everybody works from home. They set their own schedules. Even though we have 24/7 coverage, everything's very flexible in that sense. And if people want to move between some of the different businesses to just gain different experience, they just start a Slack DM with me, and we can figure that out. So it's really nice because it gives the
Yeah.
ability to like support a wide range of customers, and as team members get experience in lots of different industries that might mean changing jobs in a more traditional company.
Yeah, and I love, by the way, that you call the agents happiness engineers. I think that is so great and really, really talks about really what they do and what they're all about. But given the diverse suite of products that or websites that you do have, how is Automatic thinking about in approaching AI in customer service and experience?
Yeah, so for us, the most important thing is that we keep our customers at the center of what we do with AI, and that we try and resist or avoid geeking out too much about just the technology, because like there's a ton of fun tech that you can dig into and play with, but none of that is really relevant unless it can create a better experience for our customers. So, and we really see AI as a great way to get customers the information they need without ever having to contact our team. There's a lot of times people are hopefully starting pickleball blogs or some of the ideas from the chat. It's probably their first time building a website, and it can be a very frustrating experience. And a lot of times, they're going to give it one opportunity. And if they run into something that's a problem, they want an answer right now while they're engaged. So even though we have really great 24/7 coverage, we're hoping AI is a way of still delivering a lot of value to a customer and connecting them to whatever information they need instantly. And that's going to look a little different for some of our businesses, so that we're not taking like a one size fits all approach. We're thinking about how does it integrate into customer support flows, into the product itself, and into how customers are trying to accomplish whatever their goal is in a way that is most conducive to what they want to do with that particular product. And we're also trying to adjust our expectations so that something like the ability for AI to resolve questions of, say, like a simple note-taking app or a podcasting app that we operate, like those are going to be probably a higher percentage of issues that can be resolved than like a
Mm.
complex open source e-commerce platform that has like, hundreds of different extensions and shipping and tax rates and all these different configurations.
That's such a great point you made too about, the beauty of AI. It's easy to get caught up in the tech of it, but remaining human centric, remaining customer centric in that approach. So kind of with that in mind, can you tell me some of the successes and maybe some of the challenges you've seen in deploying AI and CX so far?
Yeah, I'll start with the challenges. One of the challenges for us is that our support's pretty technical and complex.
Mm.
We don't have a high volume of what I consider like transactional issues. So things like order status, refunds, product details, those are things like if you're operating, say, a direct to consumer brand or something where you're maybe operating an e-commerce product. Um, we don't have a lot of that volume. So that means a lot of off the shelf or sort of stock AI solutions don't have huge impact for us, because for our customers, they're always taking some sort of creative act. Like they're trying to
Mm.
build an online store, build a website. And so how to use a particular feature is going to be highly contingent upon the context of what they're trying to accomplish. There's not necessarily like a snippet you can always give them. So what that means for us is we've had challenges with kind of off the shelf or plug and play tools, and we're investing a lot more in some of our own solutions and our own chatbots to try and bring more of the context that we know a customer needs uh, into how they're interacting with the product. Some of the successes we've had, though, we were a global team with a global customer base, which obviously means we do a lot of multilingual support. And we used to use a translation service for this that was kind of like a combination of machine and human translation for support replies. But we actually replaced that earlier this year just with large language models. And we had all of our like internal team evaluate the quality of the responses, and they were like, honestly, like I could nitpick a few little details
Yeah.
here, but this is better than like some of the stuff I get back from like Spanish companies or something. uh, and it was like one was it 1/10,000th of the cost or something. Like it
Oh,
was it was
wow.
a very significant cost savings to do it this way. And it also means that our happiness engineers are fully in control of that translation experience,
Mm.
because all they have to do is write and read in English, and then behind the scenes we're just sending it off in translation and putting like a little, this was translated by an AI model at the end. We've also done some like fun experimental stuff. Folks have used ChatGPT to evaluate how effectively they're approaching like a sales interaction. So just taking like the
Oh,
live chat
interesting.
transcript and prompting GPT to evaluate like how well they presented the value of the product and a sales opportunity. And it honestly gives back often pretty good coaching and feedback. Same thing with team leads or even team members doing performance reviews. That can be something where it's kind of hard to write with like precision and directness. ChatGPT can be really good at doing that. We also had a happiness engineer just recently build a little app through the API that generates plain English explanations of like tricky error messages in our e-commerce platform, so that are like to a normal like e-commerce merchant completely inscrutable.
Yeah.
But it turns out GPT is pretty good at telling you what that error actually means and sometimes how to go fix it as well. Which is nice because sometimes when you're really deep in the product and somebody's like, what does this error mean? You're like, oh gosh,
Yeah.
like, how do I explain this in a way that
Right.
doesn't draw from all this other knowledge you're not going to know about?
That's a great use case too. I mean, because you mentioned before with a lot of your products, if you're creating a blog, you give that one chance. It's very easy to get technical, but adding that layer of simplicity or allowing, the happiness engineers to be able to offer a simple solution to your customers is key.
Mhm.
One thing that we talked about before this call is one of your goals is to build AI deeply into your company's culture. And you've mentioned a few ways in which you're doing that. What are the kind of things that you're doing to make that happen? Are you seeing success in doing that, or are you seeing, pushback from happiness engineers using these AI tools?
So far, we've seen a lot of success and not really a ton of pushback. And we've been very upfront with the team too that our motivation in adopting AI is not to like reduce the size of our team or anything like that. It's to enable us to grow more as a company and serve customers in new and interesting ways. So I think that's probably helped smooth over some of that. Couple of things that we've done to kind of seed it more in the company's culture is we did this. This is going back to, I think it was March or April. We did a company-wide like AI experimentation month. Our internal development and like learning organization put this on, where the encouragement was basically pick literally any AI tool you want to use for something personal or work related, like whatever you have an interest in. Try it out this month, spend some time with it, and report back. We do a lot of internal blogging as a company
Mm.
instead of email. So we had this internal blog thread with like recaps of what people learned and experienced from lots of different things. And I think it helps to give people the space to experiment with whatever they're most passionate or interested about rather than restrict it specifically to like work stuff. Cause I don't know, like maybe you want to get better pickleball strategy or like learn how to make espresso better or something. And like if that's what you're passionate about and you feel like you can evaluate how AI is making you better at it, like great, go ahead and do that, and then you'll start getting ideas for how to apply it to work. We also I worked with our legal team and we put in place just like very common sense guidelines for how
Mm.
teams can use AI, trying to steer away from any like scary barriers or like, oh my God, be very concerned about this. It was just like, no, it's just use, here's some kind of like benchmarks or ways of thinking about it and use your best judgment and use common sense and it's going to be fine. Because I think sometimes people can get a little in their head about, oh, am I going to like leak all
Uh,
this private data? And it's like, well, just, if you're concerned, just don't do it. Like do something else.
yeah.
And then I think lastly, I would say one thing I've been trying to do is join calls with teams across the company that come from non-engineering backgrounds and helping them, in accounting or legal or finance understand, help skeptics understand where there's actually value and help the like early adopter optimists understand like, no, like this isn't going to be magic for you. Like you're not going to be able to just sort of change your life overnight.
I think that's a great way to think about it too. I mean, we're experimenting with different, AI tools as well and internally, and just getting people hands-on using them just helps build that confidence in what they can do because it can seem scary at first, but just
Totally.
jumping in, playing around, you can usually figure out a lot on your own.
Totally. And that's a big part of what we've been encouraging from happiness engineers too, is like, if you get a lot out of using ChatGPT to give you feedback on your support interactions with customers, like great, do that. Share it with colleagues. Like don't worry about whether we have some officially sanctioned way of doing it.
Yeah. And speaking of happiness engineers, and you mentioned that your goal is to amplify their skills, right? Which I think a lot of CX leaders feel that way too. It's not to replace, it's to really amplify their abilities. How do you think everything happening in AI is going to impact the role of happiness engineers over the next couple of years?
I think it greatly increases the importance of how we build relationships beyond just fixing technical support issues. I think of it as like we have to think a lot more creatively about how we connect with our customers and kind of demonstrate that humanity. And I think companies that are able to do that well will have a lot more success. And I think part of why that is if AI is capable of delivering like a 70% good enough solution, well, then by the time somebody says like, ah, that wasn't really what I wanted, and they're talking to
Mm,
somebody on your team, their expectations are going to be substantially higher because they already got something that was like kind of good enough from AI. Now they want the thing that's really, really good. So I think the quality bar for our own work is going to be higher. And, you know, the way I think about this is like giving our team space to be, if you think of like traditional hospitality, thinking of software companies going through like an evolution of say what hotels did maybe decades ago, where like there are hotels under like the Marriott brand that are just, they don't really care about who you are as a person. You're just filling a room and then leaving at the end of the night. But then there's also like the Ritz-Carlton, and they're going to care, they're going to
yeah.
remember, they're going to have like a tailored experience. And obviously like we're not running a luxury brand, but thinking kind of along those principles of how can we create really personal connections, even if it's well beyond the tasks that our team has traditionally done. Thinking more of like, what's the job or the purpose of why we kind of connect with the work. So maybe we're answering fewer live chats and emails, but we're calling more merchants who just passed their first $1,000 in sales and saying, hey, congratulations. Most stores never get to this point. Like, there's some ways we could help you make your site even better if you want to give us a call back.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot of it too is, saving your agents or the happiness engineers time so they can focus on those higher value types of
100%.
tasks, build those
Yeah.
human connections, which we know are so important.
Yeah, and thinking of like, anybody who we're very fortunate to have a team that's been with us for a long time. Like our turnover is very low and our average tenure is quite high. And anybody working in a support role in that kind of an environment, like there's so much of your day-to-day work where you're just like, the answer routinely. You're
Yeah.
like, this is the like nth variation of what I've seen of this. I know how to answer it. And that can all be very productive work. But if you don't have to do that, now you get the space to think more creatively about how can I bring the full sort of scope of my skills and abilities rather than just churning through like the 14th version of, how do I add a image to the header of my blog post?
Yeah, that's great. That kind of triggers a question for me. I'm sure you're like me and you're always paying attention to what other companies are doing and the experiences they offer, particularly their AI powered experiences. Have you seen any external experiences that are using AI, it doesn't have to be generative AI, that really excite you or, something that you find very inspiring or even that you could emulate yourself?
I think in the CX side, I haven't seen anything like firsthand that's really blown me away, but I've heard of some like really kind of incredible outcomes from peers. Like a friend who runs like a direct to consumer brand was able to automate literally 60% of their incoming volume. Um,
Wow.
and uh, they're able to run like a pretty decent sized business with a team of two. Like they've not, it's simplified a lot of the growth and hiring things. And because it's like a direct to consumer brand, it's a lot of like things that are just not a good outcome if you're having to wait on a support team to just get back to you about order status or like nutrition information about a food product, that kind of thing. Uh, the stuff I've been most excited about on more of like the kind of product and customer experience side of like that side of customer experience, I think the folks at Canva are doing really cool things in their product, just in terms of like using AI as a. I'm kind of most interested in AI when it's beyond just like always present sidebar text chat, because I don't
Mm.
think that's necessarily like the best interface for a lot of customers. And Canva's done a good job of making it always like right next to what you might want to do. It's not like super prominent. It's not just a big sidebar, but it's always like right there if you want an easier way to transform text or make a poster or some of these things.
It's almost like AI is being directly infused into those experiences and touch points.
Exactly. Like I think AI is at its best when it's not. A lot of times I think the like, right rail sidebar is there's some user experience issue in the product and you're trying to bolt on, or even in the customer support flow, and you're trying to bolt on AI as a way of like avoiding that. And I
Yeah.
don't think that actually creates a better customer experience or a better customer support flow. What's better is thinking like, how would we design accomplishing this task today given what AI is capable of?
Yeah, I think you'll see that more and more. I think you're starting to see AI really infused each of those touch points into the tools, and I think that'll become almost the norm within the next couple of years. But
Yeah, I agree.
I know when we're talking to a lot of leaders, AI can seem like a scary thing, particularly generative AI, as folks have legitimate concerns about hallucinations or bias. Is there any advice you would give to the listeners here about how to start using generative AI in CX?
Yeah. Um, I think there's a couple pieces, which is like hallucinations or bad answers are true. The other thing is like that's happening every day in your team right now, right? Like we all probably see, like if you're in a leadership role, you sometimes see the angry customers where you look back at the thread and you're like, oof, like this one was our bad. Um, it happens. Like what matters is I think kind of the rate at which it's happening and then how quickly is somebody able to be aware of that. So I like to think of risk with AI or anything is less about how can we prevent bad things from happening and more how quickly can we be aware when a bad thing happens and then fix it. So that's probably where I would focus if hallucinations are your big concern. But I would also think a lot about to improve that, like think a lot about AI as being the primary consumer of all your documentation, right? Like that, I think there's a structure and sort of shift we're going to have to make to take the fullest advantage of generative AI, because I think that's going to be a much better entry point into documentation about your product than like a traditional help center. Um, and you know, beyond that, like a lot of it, I would say, is spend time understanding your customers and make sure that the way you're implementing AI is going to improve their experience and what they need rather than optimize your own like workforce just to make it
Mm.
like super corporate and jargony, right? Like um, if you're if you're pushing past your reservations and implementing AI because you want to drive some sort of efficiency at the expense of a customer experience, yeah, that's probably going to be a really bad outcome. But if you can understand the problem you're trying to solve, then it gives you a much better framework for understanding, are some of the risks or trade-offs worth it for the benefit that you're going to deliver? And that benefit becomes about the customer and their experience rather than like a line item on your P&L.
Yeah, I think one thing that you said that really struck out to me too is, that like generative AI and AI is a data hog, right? It needs a lot of content. It needs a lot of data, which yes, does mean that your knowledge base needs to be updated and robust, but also using, AI tools to help create that documentation, to help generate new help content to use. So it's almost like a full cycle of it building, creating, and then referencing itself.
Totally. And one thing that we did as we developed our own internal chatbot was we used GPT to evaluate the answers that it was providing us. And that can actually
Hmm.
create like a very good evaluation engine because we basically built this evaluation engine that gives us a quantitative way of understanding the quality of a response. And so as we were then adjusting the prompt and adjusting the way knowledge was chunked and indexed in what we were sending over, we had a way of understanding, are we getting better or worse in the quality of our responses to real customer questions?
That's a great point. And I just got a great question from Moss here. I want to ask, could you suggest a valuable starting point for an administrator to self-educate, in preparation for introducing AI to the company as an additional benefit? Do you have any go-to resources? I know I have a few.
Yeah, I think partly it depends on kind of your company and the context. I'd say my favorite, like plain English, easy to understand newsletter that has like a year's worth of archives at this point that are very worth going back and reading is Ethan Mollick's. I think it's One Useful Thing on Substack. Ethan's a college professor who, in some cases, like requires the use of AI within and ChatGPT specifically within his courses for students, and he just has a very like relatable way of understanding how to use these tools, what they're capable of doing, and how they can influence work that isn't programming, isn't technical, is more sort of humanities and language based. That would probably
Yeah.
be my like if you're trying to introduce it to a broad audience, that's probably where I would start because it gives you a lot of ideas and language for how this stuff can be structured.
That's a great one. Yeah, that's a definitely good one to recommend. And I know we're running on time, so I want to make sure to ask at least one more question. What metrics would you use to measure the success of AI implementation? I know we've chatted a lot about how, AI does change success metrics overall.
Yeah. I think the a couple of the metrics that we're thinking of, like on the product side, we're thinking of usage right now. We aren't quite sure like what the right solutions are, but we look at how people engage with them. On the customer support side, we look at a few things. So we're tracking, traditional like thumbs up, thumbs down metrics, like what's kind of the user quality there. We're looking at what percentage of incoming interactions are being resolved by the AI, right? So what percentage are having to escalate to our team? And beyond that, I would say it's tempting to try to just manage like a chatbot by metrics alone. But especially in the early stages, which is where we're at right now and rolling this out, I think it's much more effective to have a couple guideposts like resolution rate or escalation
Mm.
rate, and then spend a lot more time looking at individual instances and trying to dig into like can I find examples that were really good or really bad? And then understanding how those break down across different categories and looking at that customer experience rather than a metric that might be moving up for the right or wrong reasons, but you don't know because you're only looking at the metric.
I understand the reason the shifts are happening is so key with it. We sometimes get a little too lost in the actual metric themselves.
Yeah.
And last question from Travis: what would you suggest to get top performers to become early adopters of AI?
Um, yeah, I think it's tough because often your top performers are going to be the ones who have like most optimized the current
Yeah,
system. And actually, there was a some research done by the Boston Consulting Group that showed AI usage within their like consultant pool did not benefit top performers as much as like sort of sub-median performers. That basically AI closed the performance gap between their very best consultants and their not as good consultants. So that maybe sounds kind of scary if you're trying to get your top performers on board with something. Um,
do you
I
think
would
part of it is including them in the feedback cycle too, in that loop cycle, getting their
100%.
input on these tools?
Yeah, I think that the two things I would suggest is like, how can you get their input on what generative AI is putting out and focus that really on not would they generate the same answer, but is that answer something that solves the customer's problem? And then also thinking heavily about those top performers probably have aspects of their job that they find mundane, boring, or that hold them back from other things they would like to work on. And go figure out if there's a way that AI can remove the time that they need to spend on that. Because your top performers are also probably the people with some of the most ideas of how they can
Yeah.
benefit your company. And if you can free them up by taking drudgery or repetitive work off their plate, then they're going to suddenly start seeing the value of this because it lets them do more interesting things.
Yeah, that's a great point too. And I think we're also hearing a lot about folks, like you said, also infusing some of the traits of their top performers into those more advanced chatbots as well. So there's a lot
100%.
happening in that space. So unfortunately, Andrew, we have gone right up to time. But I wanted to thank you again for being our guest today. Really enjoyed this conversation. And for those of you listening at home, thank you so much for all of your questions. I really hope you enjoyed this session as well and took away some good nuggets. We love to hear your thoughts. You'll see a link to the survey from Josh in the chat. Be sure to respond to that because we do choose 3 random respondents to each win to win a $20 Amazon gift card. With Black Friday coming up, it's definitely a thing to try to get. So thank you all again, and thank you again, Andrew, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks all.